Hi, I'm Jon Atack.
I'm Sam Atack.
And we're going to talk about the concept of the authentic self.
Sounds good.
Does sound good. We've prepared for several minutes
Yeah.
for talking about this. It's a commonplace in the, am I allowed to use the word cult?
New religious movement.
It's a commonplace in the destructive new religious movement scene. And that doesn't mean that things new or a religion or a movement, by the way. It's a specialist term. It's a commonplace to say that people who have belonged to a destructive cult group, an authoritarian group, or indeed been in an abusive relationship of any kind, whether with one person or in a mass movement, anywhere in between, that they lose their authentic self. And it's often said that that is like there's a cult self, totalist group self, abusive relationship self, substitute whatever words, delete where inapplicable. And then there is this authentic, genuine self. Now, I've been disagreeing with people about this for many years. I'm a well-known contrarian. I remember a conversation with Jolly West, and I'm told off for mentioning Jolly West because he was once named on a list as a member of the CIA's mind control programs. That's as much evidence as I've been offered so far, and that may well be so, and I'm sure he'd be very sorry about it if he was still alive. Certainly, in my, I think, 4 encounters with him, each of which lasted for several hours, I found him extremely informative and learned. I've not met many people who are as smart as he was. But he talked to me about, he just published a paper in the 1990s about, the early 90s, about identities. And what he was saying was, and I like his way of looking at it, that the personality, coming from the word persona, meaning a mask, that the personality of a person is composed of many identities, and my way of looking at that is sort of like an XY axis graph, where one part of the graph, say the x-axis, let's call it that for the moment, yes?
Yeah, let's call it the
Happy
x-axis.
with that. The x-axis, that could be what your mood is, how you feel. So if you're irritated, or if you're happy, or if you're sensing monotony and tedium, and you shouldn't be right now, then that is the identity, the mood identity you have. Then there's who you're actually talking to. So you're talking to your mum or one of your kids, one of my kids, the pet cat, Lucy, your boss,
The
wifey, somebody who works for you. You actually talk to them in a different way. Do as you're told. And if you then have the mood, that axis against that, then that will be, for my money, your identity at that time. Now, what happens when you come under the spell, the enchantment of a dogma or a charismatic individual, and I think it is more usually a dogma than a charismatic individual that takes us into this thing. But if you're in an abusive relationship, there may be some charisma in the person who's being damaging and horrible to you, but probably not. They're more likely a little bit narcissistic. And narcissism and charisma, well, they don't really go together all that much, I don't think.
Unless you're O.J. Simpson.
Unless you're O.J. Simpson. That's a good point, actually. He was very narcissistic.
Yeah.
And quite charismatic.
Yeah.
But when you get close in a relationship to somebody who is publicly charismatic like that, you find out pretty soon, in his case, that he had a severe cocaine problem. So sue me, OJ, from your cell. We've been fascinated by the ideas of Eric Fromm, and we can't stop going on about it.
Oh, can I talk about that?
Yeah, talk about Eric Fromm.
So he figures that the fake identity doesn't just apply to when you're in a cult group or something like that, but in normal society there's this process of individuation where you construct your identity by the clothes you wear, or having a better car than your neighbour, rather than important things like are you looking after your friends and family.
And he calls that the pseudo-self in his first book, Escape from Freedom, in 1941. Don't you just love it, the way that I spout these dates? Doesn't it make me seem so clever? Don't check them, because they're all wrong. I just make them up. He'd come away from Nazi Germany in 1933. He was Jewish and he was a communist. And that didn't bode well for his future in Germany, so he went to America. And he pondered the thought as to why Nazism had taken over with such ease. You know, and let's remember that fascism was spread throughout the Western world. You know, I've this week been reading Joe Zimhart's very good autobiography, where he talks about the silver shirt movement in the US, and there was a brown shirt movement in the US, which had a massive rally at Madison Square Gardens. Tens of thousands of people doing all the Sieg Heil nonsense. The black shirts in Italy, of course, the movement in Spain, the French fascists, the British fascists. There was a lot of it about, and it's not very good for you. So Fromm was trying to work out, how is this? And he felt that it was getting worse, that people were less able to have a true personality, a true self. And he talked about the pseudo-self, the pretend self, which is the, what Freud would have called the superego, I suppose. The idea that you've got a set of rules that you've got to follow, and if you follow them, then you're an okay person. And if you don't, you're not. And so you buy a car so that will impress your neighbours. You dress in a way, as you say. I was interested in the use of the word individuation, by the way. What do you mean by that? Because to me it means separation, not individualism or the construction of the individual, but to individuate is to withdraw from the group, if my understanding is right. Our dictionaries are underneath the sound recorder, so we can't look.
As far as I was aware, it was pretty much describing that process, constructing your identity as a constant process of buying things and stuff like that.
Yeah, to appear, it's basically appeasing the people around you and doing what you're meant to do, which a lot of people have forced into them in childhood. Schools tend to do it. The idea of an individual becoming a creative, independent self doesn't seem to be very important in our society. So what happens in an abusive relationship is that the other person doesn't allow you to have an identity. You're not allowed to see your friends. You're not allowed to see your family. You are isolated into this, isolated and engulfed, to use Alexandra Stein's expression. I think it's original to her. It might not be, but isolated and engulfed, and you become part of this coercive, controlling relationship. And your ambitions, your aspirations, your tastes are all suppressed, and those things are expressions of your identity. So we contain many identities. This is not to be confused with multiple personality disorder, which along with Jolly West I question deeply. That's now called dissociative identity disorder, and the idea put forward, say, by Martha Stout, is that we're all a whole bunch of separate identities, and that these can dissociate from one another. Well, that's not my experience, Martha.
No.
My experience is of a continuum. There are no little blackouts where...
Yeah, do these identities change, or do you just have a load of really fixed ones for all situations?
Well, I had a horrible situation where I knew two women, who I'm not going to name, who both read a book called When Rabbit Howls, which is the autobiography of a person who reckoned to have, I believe, 99 independent personalities, all discovered during therapy. So I'd like to see that therapist and punch them on the nose. And I'm not a violent person, but that person deserves to be punched on the nose, because inducing that sort of condition in somebody is a bad idea. I'm not saying that there aren't people who have dissociative identity disorder. There may well be. I just haven't met any of them yet. I have met people with schizophrenia who exhibited different aspects of personality, but these were not unknown to them. That that they were aware that in different moods they behaved in different ways. So I'm not denying it. But what I am saying is that you can be intruded upon to such an extent from the outside that you don't properly develop your own personality. So you have what I term a parasitic identity. Flaville Yeakley. Flaville Yeakley was asked, what a great name that is, isn't it? Flaville Yeakley. So, cheers to that. There's no alcohol in here, I'm afraid, but cheers to you anyway, Flaville. He was asked by the Boston Church of Christ, Kip McKean, to demonstrate that his group was not a cult group by doing a personality inventory. I think he used the Myers-Briggs, which I'm deeply suspicious of, but nonetheless, because of the number of people involved and because of the similarity of the results, I think it's a valid test. And I think he tested 900 people. You can find online his publication, The Discipling Dilemma, about this, which is very interesting. He would later become the head of the American Society for something or other to do with personality, which Spike will, she'll complain about me wearing a pale shirt and try and run across it somehow so you can read it. Well, it's a hard world, what can I say? And he determined that these 900 people actually, he asked, how were you 5 years ago? How are you now? How do you want to be? And how they were now and how they wanted to be, put them in a clone position. And then he checked other groups, the Moonies, I think the Way International.
So even in groups that don't directly control communication, like Scientology, you still have the cloning process going on.
Yeah, becoming like this perfect self. I think it's where the idea of charisma needs to be extended a bit further, because as a member of a group, you have an ideal view of the leader. And it's pretty much like when you fall in love, the infatuation period, which I've waxed lyrical about in various places, and have been incredibly privileged to work with Yuval Laor on the idea of infatuation, which I proposed to him for his model of love some years ago. And we've, as I say, it's been a privilege working with this astonishing man. But in infatuation, you only see the best in somebody, but you also project into them the ideals that you think of. So they become the perfect person for a fairly brief period of time. Now, 6 to 18 months, some people say, I don't know, 10 minutes, whatever. What happens with charisma is that you become infatuated with the idea of the leader. So with Ron Hubbard, I thought he would probably be a really decent bloke.
Yeah.
Really friendly, really supportive and encouraging. When I found out that he spent a great deal of time shouting at people at, a few inches away from their face and putting them down with the most loathsome and oppressive statements, I changed my mind about him. He was no longer an ideal for me. And I realised, even then, and this is 37 years ago, I realised 37 years ago that I projected this into him. And, some people will talk about a father figure or a parental figure. That might be part of it. It might be significant. But there is this idea of somebody being actually the perfect you. So I sat down, and at that time, 1983, 84, I wrote down, okay, how would this perfect person behave? And I realised that it wasn't me.
Yeah.
And so I set up a different scale and a different way of looking at that, which was basically saying, well, I'm proud, I'm conceited, I'm vain, I'm jealous, I'm envious, I'm foolish. I laid down a set of characteristics that actually apply to every human being. I'm not modest, I'm so on and so forth. And said, well, I'm all these things. And I may be able to improve on it a little bit. But it's better not to say, gosh, I'm You know, like Donald Trump, you know, one of the things people don't know about me is how humble I am. And the reason they don't know that, folks, is because it's not true. But he actually says that in Think Like a Champion, if you want to look it up. What a great book that is. And only this big. I mean, tiny little book. I thought I was going to get a proper book. You know, it's this tiny little thing, but never mind. So there's a great Patricia Crittenden, a book called Raising Parents, which my friend Nick Child recommended to me, for which I'm very grateful. She puts forward a model where she says, okay, let's forget about mental illness. Let's stop, you know, having the 1800 classifications and what have you in the micro. Let's just forget that. Let's say people need to grow up. Before we estimate their mental health, they need to grow up. And most people don't. Most people are held perpetually in the consumer society as adolescents, desperately longing for that next package from Amazon.
Needing to jump through the hoops.
Needing to jump through the hoops of the system so that they can have the status that the system will confer upon them. Yeah. And plenty of scrambled egg on their shoulders in there.
I think the understanding of your personal identity is quite important to maturing, to being an adult. I mean, as Socrates says to Gorgias in the Gorgias, the question he asks him is just, who are you? Gets his pupil to ask him that, actually, which he can't answer.
No, he was Gorgias.
Yeah.
See, there's the answer.
He's a sophist, so...
Yeah. The Who did a song.
Who are you?
Who are you? And
that's probably more.
I don't think they didn't really know.
They didn't?
I don't think so. They made a lot of money though.
With the Who?
The Who. They bought Shepperton Studios.
Yeah.
You know, a film studio. Like, that's how much money we've got. We've got our own film studio. So that's who they were. Who are you? The age-old question. That to develop a personal identity, a self, an authentic self, means to grow up. It means nothing else. I spent 30-something years hoping for enlightenment, and it didn't happen, and it's not going to happen. I realised that it didn't matter. I realised that what's important is the quality of my relationships with other people. And I have a bit of a tendency, actually, now, which is that I tend to associate with people I like and who like me.
That seems silly to me.
Yeah. Rather than associating with people whom I like and who don't like me.
Yeah, that'd be good.
I spent a few years doing that.
Really?
Well, let's not talk about the specifics of that. I think you know some of them.
Yeah, probably.
People who were hostile towards me, people who wanted me to be a different person, and tough.
Yeah.
You know, I'm not. It's not going to happen. So that being curmudgeonly, I love that word.
Curmudgeonly.
You know, it's asserting, no, this is who I am, sorry. Take it or leave it. Jump. Being able to say, I've grown up. I may have grown up into a kind of twisted and bizarre human being, who knows? But I have grown up. I don't feel inclined to take other people's opinions about me without thinking about them first. I'm absolutely willing to hear any criticism or critique, up to a point, and think about it. But I will then reject it if it's not true, and accept if it is. I had a conversation today about this notion of perpetual therapy, that people are works in progress that have got to keep on developing themselves. Well, I'm retirement age now, so sod it.
There you go.
So on leaving a group or any kind of relationship that's negative, and indeed in the process of growing up, I would agree with Eric Fromm when he said that about 2/3 of people never grow up. And our society really isn't helpful in any way. They want to bombard you with ideas, vote for this person, buy this product. You'll be just, none of that is relevant to becoming a self. What's relevant is deciding, as I suppose any good artist has to decide, what do you like?
Yeah.
If you're going to be a great artist, then it's not pandering to the taste of the Sforza in Milan, as Da Vinci did. It's what do you like? What resonates for you?
There was a great video you did with Christian about recovering preferences, and when he gets a client who says that they don't have any, he makes this horrible drink for them and tells them, now do you not have any preferences?
Such a great guy.
He is a great guy.
A master at the drink.
But he said he likes the drinks.
Yeah. Yeah. Dear Christian.
Yeah.
The best of them all. So the authentic self, I don't think we... I think I'll say it's the final point and then we'll make 10 more.
Yeah.
I don't think that we go back to a place where we had an authentic self. I think that when you leave a group, you have to integrate the experience of, you know, the parasitic identity, look at all of the things that you came to believe, decide whether you still believe them. I keep emphasizing this because so many people just don't do it. They think they can just walk away.
Yeah, and when you've got the lingo stuck in your head, like when you've left Scientology or something,
Any
you
of
can't
these
just
groups.
throw it away.
Yeah.
It's become part of you, and you need to understand that.
And with Hubbard and Scientology, he puts forward this idea that people don't understand things because they don't understand the words, that they don't understand the concept. And there's a little bit of a trick in there, because even when you get rid of the words, you need to address the concepts.
Yeah.
So in Scientology, you have something like the overt motivator sequence. An overt being some nasty thing you've done, a motivator being something nasty that's been done to you. And people go away and then believe in karma, which actually is a word that means action. So
Karma,
not worth
Vipachi.
Vipaka.
Vipaka.
Yeah, nice
Not
try.
Vipachi. I don't know what that was.
He just
Makes it up.
wants people to think he's clever,
Oh.
just like his dad. But they don't look into the concepts in Hinduism and Buddhism that associate with that, which actually make it patently obvious that it's nonsense. Sorry. You know, there are people who dislike me saying that, but it is. Karma is nonsense. The lords of karma couldn't possibly keep a record for every ant, for every bacterium, for every little viral cell and what it's doing, and integrate all of that into the next moment. It would just be... it's just too silly. Sorry, guys.
To think everything's just a response to the first thing that ever happened.
It would
It's
mean
sort of
the first event triggered everything, and
Yeah.
and you'd get a kind of Presbyterian predestination then. If your name is not in the book of life, then you won't go to heaven. Well, tough, you know. I don't like the sound of it anyway, frankly. So the thing is to develop and become yourself, and by all means then maintain and change what you need to do, but come to your own decisions and understand that just because you're with somebody who loves, you know, coffee beans that have been passed through the system of a civet cat, you don't have to. You don't have to like coffee at all. You can decide according to your taste, and that's true of all art or culture. Your taste is what matters. It's also true of all the moral decisions you make, that you decide. And by developing a self, as long as you aren't a psychopath, who fundamentally does not have a self, but that's another long, elaborate conversation. By developing a self, you grow up, you become mature, and you become life-affirming. You become supportive of other people. You become able to forge strong relationships and to be supported when you need support. And by doing all of these things, heck, you make a much, much, much better world. And when you've done that, come back and tell us about it.
Yeah, there we go.
So that was the authentic self. We had one once, I think, somewhere. I am Jon Atack,
I'm Sam Atack.
and we thank you very much for your time and attention. We really appreciate it. Thank you. Hi, Jon here. Thanks for watching. We'd appreciate it very much if you would click like, as well as subscribe, and click the bell for notifications. Every dollar helps, and we welcome new patrons on Patreon, or you can make a one-off payment with any currency through PayPal. Thanks so much. 37 years ago.